How do you get involved in a society if you don't even move in yourself? You ask and you say, we've been excluded. Oh, I've not been carried along. But whose fault is that? You need to get involved to be included. Good evening. Welcome to the Nigerian Pride. Today, April 22nd, 2021. And I am your anchor, Lion Olushokumi. Today, we'll be going on to the second series of Africans and African Caribbeans in Scottish politics. If you've been going through the promo for the past 7 days or more, you should have known who the guest is today. But I'm not going to be the one to introduce him. He will introduce himself, as we always do to all our guests on this program. So without any further ado, let's get started. Hello, guest.
Thank you, Lion, for inviting me to your program. Adebayo Aibinu. That's my name. And it's a privilege to be here. I'm a local councillor here in Glasgow, and I'm also standing in the parliamentary elections in Glasgow and East Land for the May election. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and discuss issues that are very close to our hearts and the hearts of the people in our community.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I've always known you for your simple and succinct messages whenever you make your statement. Now, he's going to help. He's going to make me to say some things further about him. If you don't know, he is the first ever Black councillor in the city of Glasgow. Yes. And also, he's the deputy leader of the Scottish Conservative group in the Glasgow City Council. He's got so many feathers. He's an academic. I can go on and on. But today, we're going to get to know him more and also discuss other issues concerning our community, as he said. So let's start it this way. I think I met you about maybe 7 years ago or more when you came to Glasgow Caledonia University then to start your PhD. I think we met briefly. So at that time, I saw you as, how will I say? I saw you as someone who likes meeting people and everything like that. But where did politics get into it?
So thank you for your question. The truth is, politics has always been a part of me, and I've always been very passionate about societal change. Even when I was in Nigeria as well, I was very passionate about things like corruption, about leadership. I find it very difficult to be quiet when I see people being oppressed, and I've always known that that's a part of me. And I'll give just one example. So in secondary school, I was the senior prefect in secondary school, and I remember this incident very well. One, I can't remember the exact details. Obviously, it's been such a long time ago. So one of the students or the class, they had not swept their class right. So I was carrying out an inspection during the assembly to kind of find out whose class is neat or not. And so I saw one particular class, and the class was very dirty. So I think I was with a different prefect then. I then said to him, I said, this class is dirty, right? But if we ask them to sweep it after assembly, they will miss their first class, or they might not even concentrate, something like that. So I picked up the broom and I actually swept the class. And yeah, I did. A secondary school teacher then walked by. I can't remember his name now. And he walked by, was like, "What are you doing?" So I explained to me, and he said something to me. He said, "You're a leader." I was 16 years old then, but I didn't understand what he was talking about. For me, it was just natural that, why would I say to them after assembly that they should? I was going to punish them, but I felt it was not right at that point. So what's the point? Let me just pick up the broom and sweep it. So I swept it. So my style of leadership is not the one that is self-promoting as some people. If you've known me for a while, you probably would have known by now. I'm much more interested in the detail and actually getting things done. So yes, that's a brief background. Brief background.
Okay, okay. Well, that's a good one because I'm trying, immediately you talked about that. That just took me back to secondary school days back in Nigeria as well, where you have prefects going around it. But it's quite moving to hear that you actually picked up the broom and swept the class for them. Well, so we can say that's leading by example. So, well, getting into it. So you moved to Scotland. If I can take the date quite all right. You moved to Scotland 2008. Am I correct?
Yes, that's an accurate
Yeah.
representation.
Yeah. Okay. So 2008. I mean, and that was from Hull to Glasgow.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Then Glasgow Caledonian University. I think you went to Glasgow University first. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Glasgow Caledonia. So yeah, whilst at Glasgow Caledonia, I remember you were one of the research student representative. Is it the voice representative? Voice something we call it then in GC.
Yeah, I was one of the students rep. That's correct.
Yeah, and then later on, you joined the Conservative Party, became the first Black councillor in Glasgow City Council. How did you navigate yourself to that position? I mean, to that point.
So here is the thing. I'm the sort of person that I don't believe in talking. I think you've just got to do it. And when you do something, other people will follow as well. So when I stood in 2017, such a long time now, well, it feels like a long time when politics is rough. At the time, no Black person, I don't think, had ever stood election. So for you to see the level of what I was getting myself involved with, I did not really have any support from the Black community itself. And to be frank, I was not expecting to be supported as well. I was standing for a party that is pretty much hated. It's like seeing fire and running into it. Even for someone who is not, who is a native of Glasgow, like who has been in Glasgow longer than myself, will find it difficult to now add into the mix the fact that I was Black as well. I remember going for a hostings and the person at the side of the hosting said, please, no nasty comment, no racist comment. Obviously, it was targeted at me to make sure people went racist against me. It was very brutal. I did not really have any support. There was no Black kind of support group or even BIM group or anything. And if I remember correctly, I even think I'm the first non-white person in the Conservative Party to even stand for an election, not even talk about being elected. So yes, it's been a journey, and also regarding my unique background, obviously because I wasn't born here as well. So I'm giving you the layers of complication that was involved in my candidacy. So it was huge, huge. At some point in time, I often ask myself if I'm crazy, and I'm not saying that to be funny. I really have, severally I've asked myself, you must actually be a crazy person, to attain some of the things. But the thing is, we've got to think long term. Life is not about what you accumulate for yourself. It's about how you inspire others. It's about driving change. And sometimes it's not about speaking about change. Yes, we must speak about change. I have to stress that. But it's about be the change that you want people to see. And when people see you as the change, you will inspire other people. People might join different political parties. People might not even necessarily in politics. People may be influential people in business, industrialists, charity organizations. So that's always been my own concept. But yes, back to your question, it was very, very challenging. And I basically had to learn from scratch.
Right. So very challenging, learning from scratch. I know, even before today, so many people have been talking to me, bring bio. And some of them would also ask me, but why did Bio join the Conservative Party? Why? And you mentioned it there as well, there was no support from the Black community, not even BIM. So the question now will be, what challenges did you really face? What challenges did you face, and how did you manage to achieve that goal you set for yourself?
Yeah, um, first of all, I've got to give all glory to God. So every of my success comes from God, and for me, that is the most. That is where my support comes from. Having said that, I still need to kind of respond to whatever divine support I receive. So, in terms of practical steps, which I think is what you want and your audience wants to hear, it's about, first of all, we need to believe in our own abilities and um, until, like I say, leadership is not in a lot of people, a lot of leaders complain and say, oh, you're not following me, you're not listening to me. I think about it differently. I think you've got to move and then other will move after you move. That's how I've always thought about it. And someone has got to break the glass ceiling. It will be one person that's going to do it. So why can't it be you? And in terms of why I joined the Conservative Party, um, there are several reasons, but let me just say, obviously, this is um, it's no news that I'm a member of the Conservative Party. There are some key considerations. I I understand the pain that people go through in the Black community, and trust me, I really do. As an immigrant myself, as someone who went through being restricted to work for 20 hours a week, as someone who has friends who did all sorts of jobs to survive university, trust me, I really do. But having said that, I suppose we have to come to things from what's the ultimate goal. I'm going to say, and I'm the sort of politician that I'm very direct. Even in my party, I still told someone recently, listen, I'm a nonsense kind of person. I'll say exactly what I think. I do not agree with every single thing my party does. I think that a statement I've made. Having said that, there are some key foundational principles, family principles. They matter quite a lot to me. I will want to support a party that will stand for families, that will stand for key cultural values that we have as a people. I would want to be with a family that is aspirational. Sorry, I mean a party that is aspirational, that really wants to not necessarily give people fish, but teach them how to fish. So there are deeper issues that I look at, that I'm looking at. And for me, it is beyond even my pain. I'm thinking about how can I help the next generation? So there are deeper things there why I've joined the Conservative Party. But like I say, some key things, family values, long-lasting economic change, education as well. Those are things that I'm passionate about. Do I agree 100% with everything my party does? Absolutely not. And I think if you're a politician, no politician agrees 100% with what their political party does. So I think that needs to be said as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I can see people are already listening to you and making some comments there. And like you mentioned something there, which I also it's an experience I think most of us have gone through. Most of us who came here to study, being restricted to working hours, doing all sorts of jobs to where we are now and things like that. And that's a good one to know. And I believe that clears that part. So coming back to this challenges, because I know I read your interview. I think it was your interview with the Glasgow Caledonia Student Voice in 2017 after you won the election.
Yes, that's correct.
You were saying that even my family, in that there was a part there, there was a transcript there saying that even my family don't understand what I'm doing. Can you explain?
Yes. So that's one thing about people often think that doing great things or aspiring to do great things would lead to a lot of support. Now, this is not even about political parties, right? The truth is, not everyone will ever understand you. And one problem that a lot of people have is that fear of people being being understood. True leaders don't wait to be understood. You just move. And if you're waiting for everyone to agree with you, you're not going to change anything. And some of the most difficult challenge, or perhaps the most difficult opposition you would face, that anyone would face, would actually come from people close to you, who suddenly think, for example, who on earth does he think he is, or what is he trying to achieve? So all that will come, and you've got to deal with it. And here is if you can't deal with your family, and you want to deal with an entire nation, an entire city, an entire world. So for me, I actually see it as an opportunity. If you can deal with the political opposition from your own family, then no political opposition will be able to stop you. Because the opposition coming from those who know you is usually the most strongest, the most bitter one. Is usually the one that can actually damage a person. If you can survive that, then you will survive politics.
Absolutely. And for what you said there, you just brought back what I usually say at home. I always call my wife the prime minister, and I call my daughter the deputy prime minister, and I say I'm the opposition leader. And we walk through that at home. But that's interesting. Now let's bring it into our community itself. Okay. I want us to bring it in from your experience as an activist and politician from the ethnic minority community. What do you think are the barriers to ethnic minority participation in the socio-economic and political development of Scotland?
I'm going to narrow that down, because if the UK's most recent report on ethnic minorities did say clearly that what separates, I beg your pardon, what unites people from different ethnic minorities is as important as what actually separates them. So if you're Asian, you have a different kind of experience. If you're Chinese, you have a different kind of experience. So I want to focus on the Black community, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And just with that, because we have no kind of structure, and also there is no precedent. So for a lot of the things we're trying to achieve, no one has achieved it. So for example, there's been no Black MSP in the history of Scotland, believe it or not. We've had Asian representatives. People say Scottish Parliament, even Asian MP. So Anna Sawa, right, the leader of the Labour Party, his dad was someone like me who was born in Pakistan, came to Glasgow, right, and actually became a MP. Broke ground. So the Asian have gone, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ahead of us. I want us in our community to understand the scale of challenge that's facing us. There is no time for sentiments, for side talk. I think, Mr. Shekombi, you will know me. I do not have time for, even from the way I text people, you will know that I'm impatient for careless talk. I'm impatient for people who just want glory. I don't have time for that. When you look at the scale of the challenge that's facing us, then you realize that something urgent needs to be done in the Black community. Otherwise, look at what's happening down south in London. People say, we've not really settled. But the Black community has settled in London for years on years. And they are still, if we're going to be frank with ourselves, underachievers. That's just the truth, right? I've said this publicly severally. Even look at my own party. We have a UK chancellor that's Asian. I celebrate the Asians. They've really broken barriers, and we should emulate them. Home secretary that's Asian. The previous home secretary was Asian as well. The previous business secretary before Kwasi Kwarteng was Asian. The current Attorney General, Sola Braverman, is Asian. When you look at all these records, you now for kids from Asian backgrounds, being the Chancellor of the UK is no longer a dream. It's something they've seen. They are not aspiring to. The next big thing for them is the prime ministerial position of this country. But when you look at the Black, even when Tony Blair was prime minister, who were the Black people there, to lead? So that says to me that we've got to seriously ask ourselves questions. What are we doing that we need to do better? And for me, that starts with children. So I don't know if you know me enough. I'm a proud African. One of the things I tell people is, call me an African. I want to be known as a Nigerian. I'm sorry, this may offend a lot of people, right? But that's the truth. And as a matter of fact, I've said publicly on platforms, I do not have time for Africans who come abroad and do not teach their children their local dialect. I think it's inferiority complex. My child is less than 1 year old, right? I speak Yoruba to her. And my wife is testament to this. I think we've got to let our people realize. I don't want children who see their Nigerian or African identity as something to discard. You've got to be proud of your identity. And I think that level of self-worth motivates people to want to achieve. So I know quite a lot of Indians, extremely successful people who employ like 200 people, millionaires. These guys speak their local language. They were born in Glasgow, but they still speak their local India dialect. And I'm saying to myself, look at the average blackie. There's a crisis of identity. They don't know whether they fit in Scotland or whether they fit in Nigeria or whether they fit in where they came from in Africa. You can be both, actually. You can be a great Scottish person. You can also be great Nigerian. You can be both. And look at what Rishi Sunak, our UK Chancellor, is doing right now. Even in terms of trade, we've had Brexit. The UK is pulling away from Europe. And one of the things, if we had people like Rishi Sunak right now, black people who are actually proud to be Nigerian, proud to be Kenyan, proud to be Ghanaian, and then government, they'll be saying to okay, you know what, let's speak to Buhari, let's get a deal for the people in Edo, because that's what the Indians are doing. And I think it's time for us to wake up. This is not about political party. I'm sick of people who go on and on. Like I said, I'm a long-term, I'm thinking strategy. That's what I'm interested in. I don't have time for short-term gains. This is not about political position. I don't have time for that. So we need to think seriously and catch up and begin to encourage our children. Let's start by encouraging them to be proud of their African heritage. There is nothing wrong. I love the Nigerian anthem that you played at the start of this program. It got me emotional. Nigeria is a great country. Great people have come from Nigeria. You have Professor Wole Soyinka, Nobel laureate Chinua Achebe, one of the greatest literary icons. You have Philip Emeagwali in the United States, who started the internet, doesn't really get the recognition that he deserves. You have a lot of Nigerians down south in London in the NHS. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You have someone like Okoje-Iweala, who is the current president of the World Bank. These are people of substance. And it's time for us to look beyond all this petty talk and actually sit ourselves and ask ourselves questions. In the next 20 years, do we still want to be begging? Because trust me, the Indians do not need the UK again. I'm going to be frank. The UK needs the Indians. If India leaves UK today, who is going to be in all those food shops? Don't be surprised if the economy crashes, because the level of business, the same thing with the Jewish people. It's not about sometimes what the country can do for you. It's about what you can do for the country. And don't get me wrong, the country has a lot to do for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the way you've expressed everything there bit by bit. And because there are some questions that have been sent in that already I think you have started addressing. Now, I know you to be what you've described yourself to be there. But what I want to now ask is, okay, yeah, we need to move. You've said we need to move. We can't be wasting our time with all these petty things. So how can we get the people, the Nigerian people here in the UK, in Scotland, moving? What are the things you think we need to do to get them moving? For example, you and I know that there's that high level of suspicion followed us back from home to this new home. Also, that this unity is there. How do we bring about this unity? How do we move things forward?
Unfortunately, I think you've touched the key issue that I think I avoided saying because I didn't want to upset people. So the thing is I don't want us to beat up ourselves too much. But when you consider the Asians, someone said to me something recently. He said, I don't know how true this is, right? But the person said to me, an Asian would never vote for a black person above an Asian, regardless of political party. Now, that's something someone said to me in private and said, it just would not happen. Now, I don't know if that's the right approach, but what that tells me is the level of unity amongst them. That is, we've got to achieve. I don't care. Look at when Anasawa became leader of the Labour Party and Hamza Yusuf. They both come from the same background, Pakistani background. He congratulated him publicly, despite if people don't realize that the SNP and Labour are opposite ends, Labour wants Scotland to stay in the UK, the SNP wants Scotland to be independent, and yet Hamza Yusuf congratulated him. It wasn't a private one because a lot of people like private things. This is SNP's Justice Secretary congratulating someone who is going to actually oppose his own leader, and he did it publicly. I'm not making this up, it's on Twitter. Now, we need that level of, let me call it solidarity amongst ourselves. Like I say, I want to take this away from politics because then, as you quite said, people become suspicious. Someone said to me recently, there's a lot of envy in our community, and all this is, that's why I spoke about pettiness. We've just got to stop it because it's the children that are going to suffer from all these issues. And one of the ways to address this, I think what you're doing right now is fantastic. And I'm looking forward to next week when all the political parties, honestly, I think that's great because people need to know that Nigerians exist in Glasgow. And this is how we're going to achieve that change. So you have a radio program at election time. That's when politicians want, that's when they have the attention to listen to people. So what you're doing is great. We should support you. We should encourage you. We should patronize you. We should not be suspicious of you. We should be proud of you. I may not agree with your political views, but I'm proud of what you've achieved. That's a different matter entirely. And we should support each other as well, because who knows? Here is the interesting bit. In this country, husband votes in one way. Believe it or not, the wife votes in different ways. That's the level of, so there is that level of tolerance and mutual respect that they have. The husband can be SNP and the wife is conservative. In fact, I know I was out, was it the Westminster general election? And one of the people stood outside, said, "Oh, I vote SNP." She abused the Conservative Party. But after she then said, "Oh, my son votes Conservative." And you can see that she hates the Conservative Party, but she told me, she was like, "Oh, that maybe her son will relate to me," that sort of thing. So that's how, it's not a do or die affair. And we've got to realize that we've got to learn to celebrate ourselves and understand that diversity in thinking. You can't say you want diversity, but you don't want diversity of opinion. And let me tell you something, politicians see this and then they didn't take advantage, right? They say, "Oh, no one should own the black vote." I keep saying this to people in our community, make them work for it. Don't go there telling them, "Oh, yes, sir, yes, man." No. I mean, in 1981, 1 naira was to £1 or $1. If not for bad leadership, Nigeria has so much to offer on the world stage. You go with pride, with value. You're not begging, to be recognized. You show what you're worth and you stand for yourself. So yes, let's start by encouraging ourselves. Let's not, because if we are to look at what we really need to do, like I said, it looks like nations are like 60 years above, maybe even 100 years. When you look at the kind of business investments they already have, and wealth perpetuates wealth. That's the other thing as well. So it will take a while for us to catch up, but let us start with the little things. I suppose that's what I'm saying. By encouraging someone like yourself, if we find someone in our community who is talented, let's encourage them. Let's not be suspicious of them, like you said. Let's not try to pull them down. And I think that's one way that we will truly achieve. And if we achieve in this nation, when we achieve in this nation, our home, our ancestral countries will benefit from it.
Good. Well, viewers at home, listeners at home, you are on to the Nigerian Pride today, and our guest is no one that you don't know, but Councillor Adebayo Aibinu, who is the first Black councillor of Glasgow City Council. I'll keep echoing that because that is the fact. Right. We have dealt with a lot of things concerning the community. And, personally, I've heard some things people even within the community say about yourself. And I think to an extent, you've been able to address so many issues. And I believe many of them will now start understanding. And like you said, we need to encourage and we need to accept and tolerate the diverse opinion we have within us. And that's very important. Now, let's move quickly to this report this report we had from the Commission on Races and Ethnic Disparities. I think it came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it states that the UK is not institutionally racist. What's your thoughts about this?
Right. So I was actually thinking about this before coming online. I'm going to be frank, right? I don't want to get drawn on whether the UK is institutionally racist or not. What I'm much more concerned about is what we're actually doing right now to tackle racism. I think for me, that's a much more pertinent question. There is no doubt about it that in society, there is a lot to do in terms of racism. So one of the most challenging things I experienced in my life was when I stood for the Westminster election in 2019, and I went for a particular hustings, and I spoke publicly in the hustings, and then afterwards someone said, "Oh, that guy, he's not MP material," and someone was stood by the person, and the person said, "But he's really good." And the person said, "Oh yes, but he's not MP material," and I knew what that meant. The person obviously didn't want someone like myself to be the local MP. So I knew that was racism. You know, sometimes racism, it does not need to be overt, but you can tell, you know, when someone is trying to be subtle about it. So I feel that pain. I think I remember going back to the car that day and feeling absolutely dejected by that comment.
Mm.
So I feel the pain, and I understand that. But I'm a believer. I believe in forgiveness, and this is something that a lot of people may not be able to relate to, and that's fine. That's okay. If we do not move on in our hearts, we end up becoming the very thing we hate ourselves. So when you look at it, bitter people actually end up committing more crime than the people that abuse them. When you look at statistics as well, people who get abused in their childhood, they grow up to become abusive adults as well. I don't want us to be owned forever. Slavery happened years ago, but I do not want the psychological impact of it to keep damaging us, such that slavery may have ended, but we are still owned, if you like, because we are refusing. The chains have now moved beyond our hands into our hearts, and that's something we've got to be very careful of. Having said this, like I said, there is so much we can do in societies, you know, to tackle racism. We've got to speak out against it. That's fine. But there is always a balance. And the bit that worries me, and to be honest, is despite the fact that is the impact of some of the extreme elements. So there are extreme two sides. There are those who say racism does not exist. There are those who say, oh, everything is racism. I think we should avoid both. I think the answer actually lies in the middle. That yes, there are good people, but there is also racism in society. And what we've got to do is to work collaboratively and constructively, not people who are on a vengeful mission. That's why I spoke about bitterness and hatred, because the problem with that is we then end up grazing kids who are angry from their youth, who don't believe they would actually achieve anything, who believe that society is already achieved. What we've got to raise our children to know there is racism, but also help them believe they can overcome it. And we show them by us speaking against racism while at the same time progressing in whatever we are doing as well. So that if we do not progress at all, our children can look at us and say, Dad actually did try, just that racism caused him not to succeed. But we should not let racism stop us from aspiring. What I've shared is a bit quite deep and slightly nuanced, but I hope people understand, you know, where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Completely understood from myself, and I like that. So, but I will still draw you back to that report. Okay. That report. And the reason is that, you know, the University of Glasgow on the 18th, I think the 17th and the 18th of February this year, came out with their own report stating that, and in fact, they apologized that yes. They have been, you know, what they've been doing, there's been racism, and they apologize with that report. Now, the report from the CRED came out giving us no institutional racism. And this thing I'm raising with you, I don't know, I think it was last month when not like 2-3 weeks ago when this report came out, and I was on BBC Radio, Scotland morning program, and I actually spoke to one of the professors on that committee. And the question I asked is that if the University of Glasgow, one of the most prestigious universities and institutions in this country, in the United Kingdom, has come out to apologize with a report, are you sure this report is correct? And the question I'm going to ask now, because I know you don't really want to get into it, but what I want to ask is that, yes, you are successful as our MSP for Glasgow and East Land. Will you be against this report?
So the first thing is on the report itself. I don't know why they've said there is no institutional racism. I think that's what exploring to find out why they've come to that conclusion. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing, obviously, the strength of feeling in our community goes against the text. And I think whenever you have such disparity between what people feel and what has been written as a sort of report, then I think that needs to be checked out. So what needs to happen from my own perspective, right, is to the people who wrote those reports are Black people as well. I think that needs to be said. But I know what I think. But I think we've got to do things properly. So the best way, I don't think it's good enough to just say you're against the report. But I think we need evidence against the report. That's how I'm going to put it. So let's start with, and this is some of the ways in our communities that we don't really drive change, because it's not okay, it's not good enough to say you're against something. You've got to show it. So what I love to see now is people collecting evidence of their experiences and showing, yes, okay, there is actually institutional racism, and let us measure that with that report. I trust that we have a very capable government that would want to see alternative evidence to what has been presented in that report. And because they are extremely well-read and intellectual people, I'm sure they would want to keep a sense of objectivity and consider an alternative reality to what has been presented.
Okay, right. I totally accept that. Okay, and I like the way you've answered me with that, and you've created an answer to that question, going the researcher way, which is good. But isn't the University of Glasgow report an alternative evidence?
Yes. So University of Glasgow myself, when I went there, I think I was only one of two Black people who graduated. So there is, I've not read that report, to be frank. I've seen the report, but maybe because of my background, if I said I really need to read something, like read every single thing, I don't want to just comment on something that I've not sat down to scrutinize. Having said that, the University of Glasgow was absolutely right, in my view, to apologize. I think that's right. But then again, I'm happy because what we then have to do is to work collaboratively with the University of Glasgow, because they've accepted that something has gone wrong. So let us work with them to fix it. And more often than not, one thing that I've seen in our communities is, like I say, we are good at highlighting the problems, but we don't raise fixers. So let me put it this way. And the Windrush scandal happened, and I would have thought that it would be a Black person that would then be promoted politically as a result of that. But there was no one in the government to actually take that slot. That slot had to go to Sajid Javid. So there are two things here. You can highlight a problem, but you need to, as you are highlighting the problem, you should also be building the infrastructure to ensure that when the opportunity arises, you're there to pick it. And this is where the issue about training our children comes into play. Fixing legislation. Who are the lawyers in our communities? I just raised a very simple example that on that report itself. Right now, we should have people who are actually looking and bringing forward alternative evidence, quantified, that can hold sway in the courts of law and say, we don't agree with this evidence. Emotions, I'm going to disappoint people right now. Emotions is not good enough. You've got to be able to articulate that. And let us have people in our community that say, okay, we don't have jobs in Glasgow, right? Okay, but as we're highlighting that problem, we're already training our children to be doctors and lawyers and musicians, such that when the legislation comes into place to help us tackle that racism in that dimension, we have people to take advantage of it. So I say to people, the fight against racism is two-dimensional. We have the protest element, the activist element of it, but we also need the intellectual or the builders. I call them the builders. They are the ones, you know, you have soldiers who go into war, right? And to defeat the enemy. But when the enemy is defeated, what happens? You then need a new set of governance. So that level of strategy is what we should have. And if I would say that's what the Asians have actually got perfect, because trust me, when they talk about racism, they have 110,000 people waiting to take advantage, not take advantage, that's not the right word, waiting to actually benefit from what they've complained about. And that's something we don't really look out. We don't really focus on. It will take time, but we can do it.
Okay, it will take time, but we can do it. Yeah, let's go to something more local from the council now. I know with your time in the council at the moment, the Glasgow Council, the Glasgow City Council has been able to achieve some things in terms of more creation of more jobs for the BIM community. But my question is, and this was the same question I asked Graham when he was on this program, I think 2 weeks ago or so, is that at the moment, it's gone up to 3.2. However, how many of them, not even how many of them, how do we get more members of the BAME community, like you want to talk about it, the Nigerian community or African community, into mid-managerial positions and top managerial positions in the council?
Great question. I'm going to be honest with you, right? Because obviously I've seen different worlds, professional world, politics world. There is a lot of politics, a lot of gatekeeping. And I'm going to disappoint something. No one is actually going to give you anything. You can fight for it, you can protest about it, but you've got to be ready to take the opportunity, and we've got to support ourselves. Breaking glass ceiling, trust me, as someone who has been involved in politics, is not easy at all. And if you're the lonely voice in a particular place speaking, it's going to be challenging. So let me give you this issue about BME employment. I actually did bring it up at the council, and I asked the question, the convener of one of the committee that I sit on, Operational Performance Delivery and Scrutiny Committee, and I said, why do we have so few BIM employed in Glasgow? It was Councillor Jane Morgan, and she brought up a couple of interesting points. The first one is attrition. So you're dealing with legacy structures. So the way the council works, it's like a career, right? There are people who have been there for 10 years. Those positions don't just suddenly become vacant. There is already, it's like when you train, it's like saying there is medical doctors shortages. You're not going to quickly solve it. The only way you can quickly solve it is by bringing doctors from other country. To plug that gap, you will need to train people for 7 years to become doctors. So there will be a 7-year gap where there will be shortages. So right now, there is already a long pipeline of people who are due for promotion. People are not going to retire. So there is all that blockage in the system as well, unless people are actually forced out of jobs. So that's one, and that goes back to the point of the level of intellectual, serious discussion that we need to have that goes beyond, BME are not in employment. These are serious issues. There are people on £100,000 salary a year. They're not going to give it up. You know, don't let anyone deceive you. There is 2 people behind them who have served the council for 7 years, who are now due to be promoted. They will not give it up. There are 2 people behind the 2 people as well who have gone through the council's apprenticeships. So the only way to actually solve this thing is to create new jobs. That's the only way. When you have a public employer like Glasgow City Council, those kind of high-ranking mid-management job, for the next 10, 20 years, there is already a set of progression. That's why I use the example of medical doctors. A medical doctor, you can't get them 5 minutes. No, it takes 7 years. To get a GP, I think takes 10 years. So they won't just appear. It takes time. So what we've got to be able to do in our community is long-term strategic thinking. It's going to be grunt work. The kind of work you're doing right now, exactly what we need to do. So some of us may not benefit from what we're doing right now, and we've got to accept that. It may be our children that would actually benefit from it. Little by little, we keep at it. Let someone try and become an MSP, let them fail. But their name would be on Wikipedia that they stood for election. So maybe in the next 10 years, if a black person wants to stand up, they won't be frightened. They know, oh, yes, this person actually stood as MSP. You broke one barrier. That's encouraged the next generation. So these things are deeper issues. There's also issues about because a lot of our people have been away from jobs for so long that it will take even mentorship programs, training programs to bring them up to professional standard. Now, that does not mean those people are not competent, but because of the system, if you have someone with a PhD who is still doing menial jobs, after a while, even the brain becomes dormant. That's just the reality of it. By the time you get back into the workforce, you realize, my gosh, everything I've learned is gone. These are real issues that's facing people in our communities, serious issues. They are coming up against people who all their lives they've had support. They've had help. They've had help all the way, bursaries, everything. Even our kids that are born here, some of them are born to parents doing two or three jobs. So there is no family life. I mean, we face a multitude of issues, and that's why for me, my focus actually is on education. And like I said earlier, it's not about giving people fish. You've got to teach them to fish. And I'm personally sick, and this is not about political parties now, of people who want to bring foreigners to come and do menial jobs. Please do not insult us. If you're going to bring us in, bring us to do real jobs. Now, people speak about Scotland. I lived in Scotland for such a long period of time. I was shocked as a young person. I think when I went to London and I saw a black person in the bank, because I've never seen it in Scotland. Until maybe 4, 5, 3 years ago. People think Scotland is diverse. Scotland is not diverse at all. It's a lot of hot air on the ground. Trust me, there is a lot of gatekeeping that actually goes on. Go to London, you will still see black people in managerial positions. You will still see, and people say there is a lot of opportunities. Yes, I take that point as well. And that's why I spoke about creation of opportunities. In fact, when I got elected as a councillor, one of the people who works for the council said to me, say, Adi, you got to think about moving down south, because here they will not stop, they will stop you. But I don't want to think about we against they. Let's work collaboratively, that's the thing. And let's try to help each other as well. Let's show that we have good value proposition. But the idea that things will change overnight by protest, someone else can lie to you, but as a brother, I'm going to tell you the truth. What's actually outside there is a lot harder than you think.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than we think. You're still on the Nigerian Pride, coming to you from the stables of Diaspora Radio International. And our guest today is no other person than Councillor Adebayo Aibinu. So, you've touched on so many things there. And you actually brought me to the next question I was going to ask about, yes, there's this system, people not wanting to move and things like that. However, down south, we see the opportunities. And I'll give you a scenario. You have people who have tried to get into jobs here in Scotland. They couldn't get through the door. And then 2 months, 3 months applying down south, they got the jobs. They even got promoted after working for 2 or 3 years. And we're not seeing that yet. I can even give you one, which is a research I did myself. And this is about African PhD students here. That out of every 10 PhD students, African PhD students who finish from Scottish universities, only one is sure of getting a job that is commensurate to the qualification he or she has. And maybe another 7 or 8 of them will find opportunities down south.
Yeah.
How can we make this better in Scotland?
So here is the thing, right? Like I said earlier, we come with a force, and I said something codedly. I said no one owns the black votes, and that has been the frustration with people in my community as well. I try to explain these things, but a lot of people don't really understand where I'm coming from. Make them sweat for the vote. I think right now it's too easy. They give you, I don't know, is it £20 a week to do something? Um, and I know people have pain. Trust me, I just explained I was on 20 hours student for I don't know how long, but I took a conscious decision that, you know what, I'm going to think higher. And even if you're in a different political party to mine, still make them sweat for your vote. Don't let them think. I'm going to be really honest. A lot of our politicians, and this goes across all political parties, they're in it for themselves. So if you have someone thinking they stand for immigrants or they stand for asylum seekers, I'm telling you now, and you may choose to believe me or not, they really don't care about you. That's just the truth. When they get what they want with your vote, then you see the real self. Judge by what society is actually telling you. And that is a lot of Scotland is not diverse as people think. We don't even have a black MP, no black MSP. In England, they've had black MP since 1980s. so that should tell you, that should begin to let you see some things and to sit up and I can say that because I'm black myself. So hopefully no one will accuse me of being racist. That we sit up and smell the coffee and let them work for your vote. It's not about saying, oh, we'll give them, let them do. No, say yes. You say you support black people, especially for people who are supporting other political parties, and say, yeah, but what are you actually doing? Don't just commission a report and say, oh, we commission report. We'll give them £20 a week to do something, but you're actually not helping their children. I fear for a lot of our children here in Scotland. I'm going to give you a practical example. And this is one of the reasons why I joined the Conservative Party, because they seem to be much more long-term in their thinking, although I'd like them to soften their rhetoric. I've got to say that. But they seem to be much more long-term in terms of, let's teach them how to fish, actually. Don't let just keep them down. And they are very honest and open, unlike some people will tell you something in your presence, but behind you, they'll say something else entirely. Look at our children. I'm standing for Glasgow and Eastland. There is a particular school in my constituency. Only 19% of the pupils end up with a fantastic grade. Only 19%. A lot of our people, Nigerians, Ghanaians, they go to public schools in Scotland. Now, those children, I'm a lecturer, right? I'm going to tell you now, they will not compete. And so you've got to choose. Is it, like I said, I don't want to preach politics. Even if you belong to I know that the chair, I understand this. I know the political leanings of the anchor tonight. So trust me, I'm not taking things from a political angle. That's why I've referenced it specifically that even if you're in another party, make sure they still sweat for your votes. I used those words intentionally. What we've got to realize is it's our children that is going to be competing, going to these poor public schools, not having the right grades, because we in our communities, a lot of our people don't have money to send to private schools here in Scotland. A lot of the natives, quite a lot of them live in affluent areas. A lot of our people are still struggling for immigration papers. They're in these communities, so they give you £20 a week, right? So, and they don't train the children properly. They don't focus on real issues that will affect your children in the next 10 and 20 years. A lot of graduates, I was very opportune, right, to be one of the lucky ones after PhD to actually was close to getting a job at the University of Edinburgh, but COVID stopped it. Because of COVID that time, the lab, so she had to postpone the opportunity. So in a sense, I'm blessed. I do not deny that. But that has come through hard work as well, and by the grace of God, like I said. But not everyone is lucky. People who finish from University of Glasgow with me, who maybe are now doing call center. I met someone recently. We finished at the University of Glasgow together. She now works in a bank. From a fantastic medical degree. You would think, oh, this person is going to take over the world, or some of them end up doing like call center. These are real issues. Make them sweat for your vote. No one owns the black vote. No one should come and say, oh, no, trust me, no one actually stands for the black community. You know, we should be speaking for ourselves. No one should think they speak for us. We should speak for ourselves. And when we have that level of ownership, you will see change. Because then suddenly the game is open. Everyone knows that even this conservative guy can get all these votes. This Labour guy can get all these votes. But right now, it's too easy because people are not asking the tough questions. They're not saying, the standard of my child's school, what are you guys doing about it? Don't tell me about telling me you're going to give me £100 a week for child credit. This child credit you're giving me, how are you actually helping her to become a doctor? How are you helping her to run a business? Those are the real issues. We've got to stimulate entrepreneurship, stimulate people to then become real influencers in society. Let me just stop there.
Yeah, that's a good one. I look forward to next week for that one because there are so many questions to answer that, but I look forward to the debate. Now, Reform Scotland and Scottish Policy Foundation, they came up with a report that we should have mayors in Scotland. You know, for our local councils, that will help transparency and accountability for the local councils, and that will also help the local authorities, you know, to bring more activities and funds into the local. Do you subscribe to that or not?
So this is entering political territory now because, you know, party manifesto on such issues. It's not something we've particularly led on. But what I'd like to see at local authority level is actually more focus from the Scottish government, whichever government gets elected. Politicians are interesting set of people. And I'm going to tell you this. I wrote a conservative budget last year, working with the city treasurer and all the who is who in Glasgow. The Scottish government or the central government think they can get away with certain things because there is no attention on local level. But really, local politics is responsible for schools. All public schools are run by the Glasgow City Council. Essential service, health, social care is run by Glasgow City Council as well. There is an issue about funding coming from the Scottish government. And as I said, you know, whoever gets elected on the 6th of May, we've got to give more priority to local government, give more powers to local governments as well, decentralize it. There is so much decentralization from the Scottish government right now. So people are getting told what to do, as opposed to helping local councillors to think about policy and using their local knowledge to actually make great policy decisions, as opposed to someone sitting somewhere in Edinburgh telling everyone what to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. They did get elected, but on certain policy issues, it becomes a problem. Schools is one of those things. Interestingly, I spoke with a schools inspector whilst campaigning this week, and she was complaining about the system of education we've got in Scotland and how we really need to address it. Not to make a political point, but it is a political point. In 1994, 1999, Scotland had the best education system in the world. Not people need to realize how far Scotland has fallen. Right now, Scotland does not even do as good as England. England has a population of 65 million. A lot of people also don't keep a sense of perspective. The population the population of London alone is bigger than the whole of Scotland combined. So people need to keep a sense of perspective. The level of challenge that the UK government is dealing with is 1,000% than the Scottish government will ever deal with. The UK is not just with 65 million, it's the 5th largest economy in the world. That comes with a lot of political pressure, geopolitical pressure, dealing with people like China, dealing with North Korea. So the scale of challenge is completely different. And that's something we need to ask serious questions about. So yes, I'm not sure mayoral to your question is the right way. I think let's improve what we have right now. And if that does not work, then yes, let's have a conversation on how to improve it.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, that's good. It's good to get your feedback, your response to that as well. And I think yourself and Graham, you stand on the same part on that one. Well, I think on that note, I would like to just say thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, because I know you're supposed to be on your canvassing at the moment, but you've given us this time to be with us on that. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And just to come back to viewers and listeners at home, you have listened to the first Black councillor in the city of Glasgow. I will keep saying that because, yes, that is the fact, and that's what he has achieved. And we have to be proud of that. As a community, as individuals, we have to be proud of that. And I am proud of him anywhere I go, everywhere I go. He has said it there. I know some of you before now, you were like, oh, Bio doesn't do this, Bio isn't this, Bio is that. I think today he has been able to spell it out to you. He's been able to tell you exactly where he's coming from, his own thought, and I believe we should respect that. And as we move forward, next week, we are going to have the BAME Scottish Parliamentary Elections Debate 2021. Already, the list of the people on that debate panel is out already. Bayo is one of them. We have also Fatima Joji. We have Aisha Mer. We have Kanunge. That's Nadia Kanunge of the Greens. And we also have Zubair Ahmed. So the five of them will be here next week. So I want you to keep it a date. Let's listen to them. Let's see, actually, if what, Graham said last week and what Bayo said today about the unity we need to have in the African community, in the Nigerian community to push things forward, if that is actually going to resonate from this debate. We'll look forward to that. On that note, I want to bid you good evening. My name is Lion Olushokumbi. I'll see you next week. Thank you.